And Beth is not here because she is in sunny Florida. So she got to take off real early this morning. Yeah, so she'll be there for a full week, which is nice. She'll be on the beach.
Yay, that sounds good.
Hi, Annie. Okay, so let's go ahead and, hey there. I think do we all know who we are at this point in this group as we look around? Yeah, I'm seeing some
Yep,
nods.
we're looking familiar, which is great.
Okay, good. Just wanted to check. So thinking about how we're entering the space today, which rubber ducky are you right now? And it could be today, it could be after yesterday's meeting, whatever feels like captures just where you're at right now. And we'll just go around and kind of say which number we are in terms of the ducky. And whoever wants to start can kick us off.
Well, I'll jump in. I feel a little like number 4, so not totally deflated, but not underwater either. But like, okay, we can do this, but I probably need to catch my breath a little bit here. So
Awesome. Thanks, Todd.
I can go. I would say I'm 7. I'm like trying to get out of being underwater. I'm not there yet, but I'm definitely, yes, I'm feeling that the energy that even the energy that I'm showing to my team. I'm just like, okay, I gotta keep it cool. I gotta have the energy and not show that I'm literally drowning right now. So definitely 7.
Okay, I'll go. I think 6 is a good one. Only because I feel like I'm holding on, but not yet drowning. Teetering, how'd they say it? Jack of all trades, master of none right now. So
I'm oscillating between 5 and 9. You know, when the duck starts to like tip over and then it rights itself back up and then it goes. That's how I feel right now.
I'm looking at the pictures. Just give me a sec. I think I understand what we're asking. Like, which duck are we? Is that the question? Currently?
We or you. Yeah.
Me, myself. Yeah. Okay. Give me a sec. I need to look at these for a sec.
I think I'm a pretty solid 5 right now. Like just feeling the sort of like deformed, like the wind is really blowing and I'm like, hello, I'm still trying to smile.
And I can go next as Becca's thinking about all the possibilities there. I would say I'm a 3. I'm just kind of some steam out of my wings, but I'm still up and I'm still looking around and feeling strong, but little less gas perhaps than normal.
Oh man. I can probably relate to that. I would say probably a 2 or 3, but I keep being drawn to also number 7 with the duck and his beak down in the water. I'm not really sure if that's where I'm at, but it feels very relatable in some way. So I'm not sure what that means exactly, but I keep looking at him and I'm like, I know what you're going through. So yeah, I think that's somewhere in there.
Great. Well, thank you all for taking the time to check in. I can't get enough of these, like different ways of checking in. I'm like obsessed with trying to find different ones. And now they have some with cakes, like hedgehog cakes and all kinds of different variations on this theme, which I find really amusing. All right, so we've got our norms up at the top. So let's just take a moment to ground ourselves in those. Okay, should be pretty familiar, right? As we have been holding on to those for a while now. And so our intentions today, and if anything else needs to be added, please say so. But I thought it would be good for us to review kind of what we heard and kind of return to the Jamboard and look at some themes and things that are kind of sticking with us, especially as we consider what engagement will look like moving forward for our team and for our bigger group as well. And then also to start thinking about what is the data that we do have available to us and that we need to start thinking about elevating and lifting so that our framework and standards work groups have something to turn to help guide kind of their thinking and their processing. And really also will need to be included in our report. So we'll need to start to think about what is that and what themes are we seeing. So I've identified some of those pieces, and you might all have other sources that we can turn to for data, but at least to get us started with some possibilities for us to consider. So how does that sound? Anything that needs to be added or adjusted for the group? Okay, all right. Well, let's dive right in. I would appreciate having someone be the note taker. Would someone be willing to step? I think is it you, Annie? And okay, awesome. Thank you are you comfortable with doing that today again? Sweet, thanks. So let's just take some time to think about what we heard yesterday. So we did arrive at an impasse and so the plan that was created in this team did not move forward, and there was not enough on the fist to 5 scale kind of excitement and feeling that it was going to be a worthy enterprise for us to go on. So we're leaving that behind and just want to take some time to really look at the Jamboard. I know all of you were probably in different groups since you were all stretched throughout. You were there to kind of listen in also, but just to be grounded in all the other spaces as well. So let's just take about 5 minutes to jump on the Jamboard and then find those groups towards the end and just start picking up on some themes or some things that we want to come back and kind of talk about together. So it looks like it starts on, slide 1. Hi, Angela, welcome. We're on the Jamboard, taking a look. Okay, that was 5 minutes. Does that feel right, or does anybody need more time? Group 2 was like, wow.
Prolific.
Prolific, yes, indeed. And just to get a sense, you were all in all three, right? Who was in group 1 on this Zoom call? Angela, okay, and Whitney. Who was in group 2? Annie, okay, and then everybody else was in group 3?
I was in 4.
I was in 3.
Oh, right.
I was in 4.
Gotcha. Okay, awesome. Leticia, which one were you in?
I left the meeting earlier and I didn't make it to the group.
Oh, okay, got
So
it.
I'm right now looking at group 2. I'm like, oh my goodness, what a difference.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
It's a
Yeah. So what are you noticing? What are some themes that have come up across all the groups?
I recently participated in a similar interview process with Project Impact, where we had to conduct a lot of in-person interviews. And I can see a lot of the concerns on the fatigue behind it, both for the ones conducting the interview or implementing the survey, and for the ones taking it. So I do see that concern, and I did after looking at all the questions, like I can see that that's going to be some of the concerns that are going to come up from some of the groups. So that's the only thing. Like, okay, yeah, I see that, and I kind of anticipated that to be the response.
Yeah, and I think also the time. I mean, spring break, right before spring break, and during spring break is just really, really challenging. Any way you look at it in schools. Yeah.
I guess also I was expecting to see something around the data analyzing. Once we do have all this data, that's a whole other process on like sitting down and reviewing all the data and coming. I mean, I remember going through that, and we took 8 months to complete the whole project, and it was a lot of work. I think it was more work to analyze the data than conduct the interviews.
Yeah, that was something that I know came up for me, thinking, okay, so we're gonna have all this qualitative data, then how are we had, I think, identified 2 weeks or a week and a half to sit through that. So that was gonna be definitely a challenge for sure. I think we had lots of tremendous aspirations. Other things you noticed?
I think it's not clear that everybody's understanding the purpose of those interviews and what the data is for. And so there's a couple of sticky notes about, is this compliance because we have to, versus we really want to hear from people and what your thoughts are. I think that is a little harder to see, what is the purpose behind it.
Was that from the second one, Todd?
I don't know where I saw it. I read it in a couple places.
I think what we had a couple of those stickies, and what we had talked about in our group was that to make sure that people knew we were doing it, not because it was required, but because we really wanted people to give.
Yeah, it was in a couple places, I think. And so anyway, and given the overwhelming don't go forward with any of this sort of statement from the team yesterday, I'm struggling with how to reframe this, so how do you pull something back out of this that's useful if most of it's called into question and people aren't understanding the purpose behind it, and even down to the questions themselves, reframing questions in different aspects. You see, some of a suggestion of, what if we just asked open-ended questions only and just see what people don't define anything, let them define it for themselves. That way we know what people know or what they don't know, in terms of how we would define things. So that's a whole different purpose versus what would you like to see in SEL standards that would be inside the classroom. So that's a very different question. This is what SEL is. These are the things that we would say, what's important, I guess, what's important to you. That could be that Likert scale kind of a thing. Anyway, it's a little hard to sift through what's relevant here for us to move forward. I'm struggling a little bit.
Something that comes up from me and my sort of a research development brain is thinking about, like, in our engagement, we don't really define or discuss what a framework or standards are or how they contribute to an education. And like our educational system, we kind of just drop right down into where people are in the system, which is a good strategy to keep things like user-centered and human-centered, but it sometimes creates this disconnect between what we're building, what we're seeking feedback on. And so I wonder if there's maybe some things we can glean or pull from the framing of the framework group, perhaps, that would help us with that, because I think it's part of the overwhelm is like, we're asking everyone about everything as it relates to SEL. And what we really need feedback on, from my perspective, is how community voice, how marginalized groups can help tailor a framework, can help tailor standards that then guide the system that we operate within. So that's just one of my takeaways. And I think it was something I mentioned really early, but it can feel really abstract, right? Like it comes back to those like core why questions that are pulling. And so I wonder if doing some work there could help clarify and actually help us kind of narrow down a bit and have more in-depth conversations with folks. Like I saw Subin's comment about a more snowball approach where, like this morning, I was at a community event, and it's a very small community event. And the Boys and Girls Club director, she and I were talking, they were talking about some SEL work that she's doing in partnership with the High Desert ESD, which then was like, oh, you all are having really deep conversations about adult SEL and how that affects, the environment at the club, how the club environment, like that would be a really great group. I was like, Bess, I'll be back. We're gonna have a conversation, right? Like there's some potential to bring this in, but just thinking through that sort of more strategic lens.
I feel like what we heard last night was like, we want to know what the system's role is, or like how the system plays a part in SEL and like what that is, rather, and maybe less so much on what we want kids to like know how to do. It's more like, how do we create the environment where there are opportunities for everyone to exhibit their own SEL that's authentic to them and their home cultures. And then I also heard a lot, Melinda, you were talking about, right, like paying people for their time. And then I feel like the third thing we heard a lot about was definitions, like, do we want to do it or not? And I think that's kind of reflected in what we're seeing on these too.
I think, I thought a lot about this yesterday. So one thing I want to do up front is really apologize, because I feel like I wasn't here for our engagement meeting the week before. And then I'm here last night, and then I feel like I threw a wrench in something, and I really apologize for that, because I think that's one of my own biggest pet peeves is like, really, you were supposed to be part of this and now you say this when it's rolling. So I really want to be transparent and really humble about, my intention was not to derail the plan, I guess. And I don't think it has to be, because the other thing is, my style is really like, when I think about this, we're talking about the micro level community, and then the macro level, we have a system that's going on. But I really do think, after last night, thinking about just the feedback, the stickies, everything, is I think the survey is the best way to go. When we talk about email, we talk about, because there's a couple things that I'm really concerned about. And So a little bit about myself real quick, and I know that Vanessa knows this, but in my private life, I have the only bilingual, bicultural mental health team that travels the state of Oregon. And so my lens is really about rural communities, what they have access to, and how all this SEL work is so crucial to those communities. I can't even tell you, because they do not have access to the same resources as our urban communities. So I think about, how will we get their voice? And really, in just the amount of time that we're given, I really do believe the survey is the way to go, in like maybe the top 5 languages that are used. And we really do partner with every school district, send it out, try to get the voices of students and parents. And because what I'm afraid of is we're going to get big pockets that we think, oh, we're going to go Portland Metro, we'll get them. Oh, we'll get, but then there's all this area that I'm telling you, my team's been to those areas, and they are depressed, and they're isolated, and they have anxiety, and their children are not doing good, and all these things. And we don't think about them, right? Because they're out. I mean, I have to tell you, like right now we're doing work at the coast. Those families have no resources when it comes to mental health services. And it's literally I live in Woodburn, so let's just say an hour and a half away from me. But those families, especially the ones from diverse communities, do not have resources. And I would love for their voices to be heard, because I think the coastal families would have a lot to say about, this is what I think our kids need, and children and kids would probably say what they need to have. And so when I think about the easiest way to send out information, I really do think that a survey would be the best, and it would take the least amount of work to do that. We do know that there's a digital divide, so that's the other piece of it. But when I think about access, I really do feel like if we do these focus groups across, for one, just because the state government is, procurement is so slow, we wouldn't be able to really get stipends at this point for people. You know what I mean? There's all these other things to consider. But I do think that would be the best way to just have voices heard. And then we figure out, and that's even the other thing, is to find out who does have that digital divide. And maybe those are the communities that we have to strategize quickly to find out how we get those voices, I don't know. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, because I do think we need to come up with solutions on this short time frame versus all the things that in the perfect world, perfect time frame, we could work on this for really like 2 years to really get it perfect and right, because it's so complicated. But in this time frame, I really feel like we need to figure out how to get this out there and get input from as many people as possible, geographically from all over. Anyway, sorry, hogged up a lot of conversation there, but.
And Melinda, no need to apologize, right? So feedback is how we grow, and we all have perspectives, and we can see more. And I think that that's the challenge, is that when we move from being in big spaces that's the value, right? We have so many more perspectives, but it's harder to do the actual work. And so that's what we felt last night, right? We had these groups here really working and attending to something. But then you miss out on the voices of the collective, and that's just naturally what took place. So please don't apologize. I do want to leave space for Angela and Becca, who we haven't heard from, if you'd like to share.
Angela, go for it if you have something. Let me look at my notes real quick here. Hang on.
I'm just gonna let you know, I'm really distracted. We're having a vaccine clinic, so I'm really excited about all the little ones that are coming, but I keep looking over there.
We should just come join you, Annie. That'd be better. That'd be way better.
I guess I would add just an overall concern about, just I've come from the elementary classroom perspective, and I think I guess I'm just wondering, there's a lot of things being thrown out here around the framework and the standards and the definition. And I guess I'm just really curious, does anybody have examples of frameworks or definitions that you prefer or you've seen work? I just get really concerned that we can't just reinvent everything here. I mean, we absolutely need to take in student perspective, rural communities, family engagement, everything, but I'm just concerned about what this group is being asked to do. If this advisory group is being asked to develop a framework where other organizations have spent decades developing it. I don't know. I'm just curious what this group would like to see out of this, because I have concerns.
I have similar concerns, Angela, but from a high school perspective. Thinking about, and Melinda, I'm in rural Southern Oregon, so I know exactly what you're saying. And we have big concerns about that. How do we help not just, diverse voices, but also voices of those who, I've said this kind of all along, like who completely misunderstand what SEL is, or like they completely misunderstand or they lump it in, like Todd said, they lump it in with other initiatives that this is not, So, and I know that happens probably in more rural communities, just because there's misunderstanding or there's assumptions that get made. And I know that that's always really tricky too. I think we often hear from our high school teachers, just our classroom teachers, that these things are really hard for them to think about implementing. And I don't think it's because they don't want to, or they don't want to have connection with students, or like pay attention to students' social emotional needs. Sometimes they don't know how to do so. And sometimes it can feel scary. We're talking about young adults, which is a really good opportunity, but for classroom teachers, that can feel kind of scary too. Or they can feel like, we got some feedback recently on some school counseling lessons that had to do with, I'm not a counselor. Like I'm not a school counselor. I don't know how to do this. And actually, maybe I feel kind of underprepared. I don't feel prepared to help students understand this fully, but I certainly can connect with my students. I can certainly find ways, and they are doing that. And one thing that they were very frustrated about is, like, you all are not even asking us what we're already doing. So that was a great perspective. It was hard for our administrators to hear that. Like, you're all telling us that we need to start implementing these things more, but you're not asking us what we may already be doing really well. That may be exactly what you're asking us to do. So I heard a lot of other good things too, but that's some perspective I'd like to share.
I think when I think of social emotional learning, I think about the word equity, and really it should be embedded in everything you do. It's not necessarily like, oh, we've got a counselor that's doing this. Oh, this is about, it's really about every single thing should be embedded with those components in it. Even when you're registering a student, there's so many things. So I love that teachers are kind of asking administrators that, because, so many times, like in my position, people come and tell me, can you tell me how I do equity in my role or whatever? And I'm in my head, I'm thinking, when you do these things, it doesn't have to have that word in it. Like a COVID response team, guess what? That's equity. You're looking at who doesn't have the resources, who needs this, who needs, but it doesn't say the equity COVID response team, and I think we get hung up on the actual titles, but the reality is that it should all be embedded in every single thing that we do to making students, teachers, families feel accepted, feeling empowered. I love that we're talking about different people's, different families' cultures, but really using a strength-based lens when we work with families, making sure that we're training our staff to be trauma informed. There's so many of those pieces that can be literally integrated into what do you call it, teacher work days, when we're actually, but teaching those strengths where you're using those tools as you're going, not necessarily this is SEL, I mean, I don't know, that's how I see this.
Do we have a common understanding of what we're going towards as far as SEL? I mean, as the advisory group, as this engagement group, because I do, like, we're all coming from different lenses. Like I said, I come from a classroom experience and not a mental health experience. So my SEL understanding and definition seems to be different than other people's in the same group. And I wonder if maybe that's some of the friction that's happening, that we're not all on the same page and we're trying to move the state forward on the same page.
And one thing I wanted to share, just as we think about the educators and people that are going to be important, just the survey or in general, the language that we use, it's really hard to ask an elementary school student to tell us about SEL, because they're going to be like, what does that mean? And so when we implement surveys, we try not to explain or give them the definition that we obviously want them, we would love to see from them, but that's really what's going to happen when we do send surveys. So, when they look at the survey and they look at the words, they're going to have no clue what that means. And we know educators are already busy. So the reality is that asking them to take the time to sit down with the student and explain that is going to be, that's probably not even an option. But I would say it's also with middle and high school students, as we were saying, they might also be like, what is SEL? But definitely I can think of our little ones that they're going to struggle the most with the content.
Yeah, Leticia,
And I'm concerned even about getting.
Go ahead, Annie.
Oh, sorry.
No.
I'm concerned about even getting surveys from little ones right now. Like with the mask mandates coming out, and I guess I don't know the logistics behind how we would ask school districts. Like, that's not something I have ever done before, so I don't know what that would look like, but to try and get that information feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
And not to mention the reality is that our little ones are also seeing everything that's happening in, with Russia and Ukraine, and it's amazing how emotionally draining it's been for them. So I'm already thinking adding more things to what they're going through. I know I hear our second, third graders asking, so what's going on? Why is this happening? Why, how's that going to hurt us? So I'm already thinking how that's going to, adding just more stuff to their brain.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that Leticia, the challenge of do we use the word SEL, right? Or do we not? That was very, very felt on this team, right? We had very intense conversations about it. And I brought it up because on the standard side, they came from a very different perspective. They were like, whoa, we can't use the word SEL at all. So they were wanting to reword the survey in a way that would kind of like what you were pointing at, Leticia, move away from that academic jargon. And I think it speaks to what Angela has surfaced, that, SEL right now, and this is just nationally what's happening, has become kind of a catch-all for lots of different things. And that's why politics are now involved. There's just a lot of ways to anchor and mold something that may or may not be. So I think our tensions here are just the same tensions that are being surfaced nationally at this moment as well.
Well,
So
and
just
It was a little awkward because we had this conversation last week. We talked about it. We talked about the reason why we wanted to bring up this definition.
Right.
And it got derailed a little bit because not everybody here was in that discussion and we didn't hear everybody's voices. So we went forward with this thought and then not everybody here was in agreement either. And that just felt a little awkward, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's something, Angela, I'm reflecting on too, because like, right, these checkpoints when we're supposed to meet with the big group, what I'm realizing is that our current model may not be the sustaining model moving forward, like our milestones. We may have to revisit all of that because if we only have certain voices that agree to it, we don't have the luxury. I mean, I'm just going to say it. We do not have the luxury of time. And so we have to find a way to come to some shared understanding or compromise before we get to the place where we have to actually vote. Because if we come up and we do this again for a framework or standards, we will not have a report. So that's something I'm leaning on, folks, and I invite you all to attend on Thursday. That's our problem of practice right now is how do we negotiate that? How do we get things in front of the whole group early? How do we commit to viewing it and providing feedback so that we can then come back, make adjustments, and feel confident that we can move forward with a plan? Because otherwise it's going to be a real challenge. So
maybe this is a technical question. Given all of this, I'm wondering if the purpose is to just simply gather feedback from Oregon communities, what's important to you? And maybe we don't talk about an SEL definition. I was just looking at the survey and there's, 100 questions or whatever, but there are what's important to you, and we just ask people, what's important to you? Is it important that kids are able to identify the culture and that they feel valued? Is it important that they have opportunities to make a difference in the communities that they're in, including their school? What's important to people? Is that what we're supposed to be doing? Is providing input to the state? This is what's important to Oregonians, and so given that, this is then how it would inform our SEL framework. Is that another way to maybe, I don't know, it feels like a little bit slightly different way of trying to tackle the problem.
So I think right now, because of where we are with time, we're not in a position, we're not going to be in front of the whole group again till March 28th. So we just don't have that capacity to turn anything around or come and gather again. But what we've been thinking about, just as we've been brainstorming today and this morning, is maybe it's more kind of like what Whitney was saying. We have a framework and standards, and then we share that and gather input after we have something. Which I'll just say, you all were the ones that wanted the input first, right? You all said that you wanted it first. So we created a process to have it. But it got turned down, which is fine. And now we're in a position where we just don't have that time to gather that input ahead of time. And so we're going to have to be thinking responsively. And that does give us, at least this team, it does give us a stretch of time to be more thoughtful and consider all of these different things that were surfaced yesterday as we think about our next steps in terms of gathering feedback, not input.
Okay, so the task then has shifted for us. I just want to make sure I understand. So we are not going to be gathering anything that will inform the standards and framework committees until they have created something. And then we will take that information out to communities and say, what do you think about this? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what we discussed today. And that's what I'm picking up on some of you have shared in this call. What other thoughts do you all have?
I have some thoughts that are less narrow than how you reframed it, Annie, and not so, but still pretty broad, because I think, as Angela is saying, what I heard Angela say is there isn't even consensus really based on the sort of diverse roles and viewpoints and experiences on our own advisory board about what may go into a framework, for example, or how standards may be framed. And so rather than us as an insular group being the only ones to grapple, prioritize, sticky note, however that may, virtually sticky note, that may be how there may be an opportunity then to turn that back to community. And I think about, I dropped into the chat sort of unceremoniously the link to the Oregon Kitchen Table survey about the Oregon high school graduation requirements, right? Like not a perfect survey, not a perfect process. I would say also grappling with some of the same, like not enough time to do the engagement required to really do this the way that anyone would want to. But if you click through the survey, there are choices, right? And so if we think about like develop, like how a framework or how standards might be developed, and then we're seeking, choices. How do we prioritize these things? If you had this versus this, which is most important, right? Like there's a way to then get feedback in that, and to have some conversations, right? So that it's not just qualitative data that's coming in, but also to then meet with people to understand some of the nuance of why they're making that choice, or how that choice is connected to their lived experience, their position in the community or the school system, et cetera. So yeah, Vanessa, I hear you're deep. I was feeling so much like, I'm sorry, I wasn't here last week either for our meeting. Like, oh, I know there was such a, like, I don't even know what the football metaphor is, but like so much work to make this happen. I did nothing to contribute to that. And now I'm part of the like criticism choir as well. Gosh, this feels yucky. But yeah, I just wonder if, reconsidering how we really want feedback to an input, and at what point makes most sense, right? Because right now we're kind of starting at like the funnel, like let's funnel everything through.
And in talking to Alexa, it may be that ODE hosts these focal invitations, these sessions, but we don't have the bandwidth to do it like per draft for the framework. Like it's going to be probably a one-time deal where we go really hard at gathering feedback, and that would include both standards and framework, because we just, like you all said, and what was surfaced yesterday, there's incredible fatigue. And it's going to be later in the year, most likely at this point. So that's something else that will be out there. But we just can't do that ping pong the way we want to, because just timeline resources are not on our side.
So they're cheering and celebrating.
Yay.
Maybe this Oregon's Kitchen Table survey, I just clicked on it. Oregon's Kitchen Table. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Oregon's Kitchen Table. I was looking through it, and interestingly, and it says it's a statewide survey. I have never heard of this. I'm a high school counselor. This is the first time I've heard of it. So it's really interesting. It talks about it. I had to reread. I see nothing about like Southern Oregon, just as an example. I don't even think I see, maybe there's some Eastern Oregon. I'm not sure, I can't quite see them. But anyway, the point is that like, this is a great example. I've never heard of this, didn't know anything about this. I'm a parent who has high schoolers, and I'm a high school counselor, and I'm thinking like, this feels very relevant to the work that I do and also to me as a parent. So I mean, it's just a good example of like, how do we not hear anything about any of this? Like I would have loved to have personally as a parent given input, so it'll be interesting to look at it. But anyway, my point is just that, gosh, that can happen so easily. It's a good example. I never have heard of it as a counselor and as a parent. And I don't see anything on there when it talks about the regions, the 19 ESDs. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't see anything about Southern Oregon ESD or any of the others. I guess I see some Eastern Oregon. So anyway, thank you. It's interesting to look at.
Do we feel like, did I cut somebody off? Sorry, Whitney, do you want to go?
No, I was just gonna say an example of like how hard this engagement is because, or how hard just statewide engagement is, because I know that Oregon Kitchen Table has been like pounding the virtual pavement, right? And missing critical audience if folks inside buildings don't know, school buildings don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's the power of our advisory group, right? In our network capacity is that we are representative of a large parts of the state. So we can, once we land on a process or a way to go about our engagement, that we can reach out and invite folks. And I think it's going to have to be a combination of a survey. Again, like we have to be very realistic with our time. I think we had really great ideas, right? And if we had a year or two, that'd be awesome. But we just don't have that. So we have to think what is accessible, what is feasible, and what's going to get us, what we need to help move us along, which is a lot.
Yeah, I guess I wonder, like, I still think it's important that, I mean, I know the advisory group said yesterday, like, we're not ready for this. And I still feel like it's important that we're doing the work ahead of time and doing maybe those, like, what Subin talked about, the snowball surveys of people at the margins where either SEL is working for them or it's not. And I just started to ask my kids today at school, because I was curious, like, what would they say? And so, yeah, I mean, one of them, I was like, when have you felt like people at school, like, really understood who you were or like got you? And she looked at me and was like, never. And I was like, great. Like, that's really important, right? Information and how, like, I just feel like if we don't do some of those, we're really missing the mark. And I don't know if there's another way that we can, like, we don't have to, can we not convene? Can we have it in a Google survey to our group that says, like, here are the 5 questions? That has to be in a.
Yeah, we're bound to rules and voting, and it might actually be getting more official as we head down a path. So this was kind of more organic, just to see, hey, where are we? Fist to 5, that was a really good idea. But we're starting to understand that based on maybe just where we all are on the team, and based on the rules of what guide this work, is that it may be more formal and we cannot do it online, is what we were told. It has to happen in a convene.
It just feels like like, we're continuing to perpetuate white systems of white supremacy when we're not, like, having those voices at the table. And it just, like, it doesn't feel right or good, or like, I don't want to be a barrier. I don't want to be the one that's like, we can't keep going. But it's also like, what's another way then to get that, like, can we have people give their input, and everyone has input before? Because I feel like what also happened was that, like, some people were on this page, right? And so if everyone has voice in what it looks like for the meeting on the 28th of March, and, like, everyone has opportunities to look at it, give their feedback, revise, and then we come together, then there aren't these, like, glaring holes of what we've missed or what, people have gotten to say their piece, and either they've come to, like, I can get behind this, I've said my piece, I'm in the minority of this group, or, like, I don't know, those things are resolved so that I know it pushes a month back and other groups are still getting started, right? Like, we're not, just because we are later doesn't mean that other groups aren't going to keep going, right?
Right. Yeah, they'll keep going.
So I guess that's my wondering of, like, can we, do that?
So I believe we meet again the 3rd week, right? So this is the 1st week. So we'll meet again in 2 weeks. And so we have one more meeting before the March 28th meeting. So one of the things that just we have to look at the data we do have also. That's just because our report is asking us to do that. We need to create some sort of landscape that we've done some sort of review. So that's something that we can control at this point, and that we can surface, and that we can elevate, and that we can share. And yes, Annie, I hear you, that we also want to like have touch points with folks, right? And see how this is landing and capture some, at least informally, which we all have access to, right? To different community spaces and kids. And I think that's what we can do. And we're getting clarity on the whole process of voting and those pieces this week. So we'll have more information about all of that as well.
I mean, this night might not be ethical. And maybe I could just do it for my own school, right? But like, I would be curious about those questions for people that are, right? Like, I work in a school of 100% free and reduced lunch, 17 different languages, 30% immigrant families. Like, I would be curious of what those experiences would be like. So I don't know if it's like, I would be happy to gather some of that information and share it. And I don't know if that's ethical, and I don't know if it's what we're looking for. And I just want to feel like we're putting the people who are most impacted at the center.
So Annie, I think you can do whatever you and your administrator say is okay. But as a governing body, if we don't have consensus or a feeling, then we can't move collectively in that direction. So I think you can all do what you feel is right with your supervisors, but as a collective body, we can't move forward in that unified way because there was not enough, we didn't have enough folks that were bought in. So with that, is it okay to pivot? Are we okay to move along from this point? Okay. So if you look at the next items, I guess what I want us to do is, are there any other sources of data that you all know of or are aware of or have done yourselves? I heard Leticia say that she's done some of this work already that would be helpful in informing our work and our report in terms of SEL. So these are just, and to be very honest, I was shared these in the morning. I kind of got a dump of all these data, ODE access to data reports. So I just started looking through them and highlighting pages and sections for each one that seemed to be relevant and could help inform us. And at least we could highlight some of the pieces around SEL. But if you all have sources of data that you want us to consider, please let us know now so that we can include those as well. So the first, anybody have any that you're thinking of off the top of your heads right now?
And for me, you've already got it. The Youth Truth is
Youth
one that we
Truth.
use. Yeah.
Okay. And could you share that, Todd? Like, is that in a way that like a PDF or some way?
Yeah, so the state's, I think, just coming out with it now. And so it's actually off of OD's website that you can get it. So I thought it was being released relatively soon, but I don't know if
Our kids are doing it right now. And
Yeah,
our
so-
like we as a staff did it last week.
Okay.
The Oregon Healthy Teen Survey is always good, but the limitations are that you're talking about 8th graders and 11th graders only.
Yeah.
And also, we think about the other limitations are students are not required to participate in it. So, you potentially have students who are not, who did not engage in it is the point. Yeah.
What's it called, Rebecca? I didn't hear it.
Oregon Healthy Teen Survey. And again, I think it's only used with the 8th graders and 11th graders. So, your population there is not, it's a good population, but not, certainly not comprehensive. Oregon Healthy Teen Survey. Lots of good stuff in there though. But just knowing that students can opt out of taking it. They're not required. And so you may or may not have all voices that you would like.
Yeah, and thanks for saying that. I think, all of these data points and sources are going to have problems. They just are. And I think we just need to name that. And then also see what we can see in there that makes sense and is connected to our work.
Hey, Vanessa, the Care and Connection pilot project. Do you see that's request access?
The care, okay, yes, and I probably can't give you access. Let me try because it's not my document. So that one comes out of the mental health model.
I think the Coalition of Communities of Color usually puts out like I don't know how frequently. Let me look.
And that one is on there, Annie. We have at least the health report, the behavioral health report, which is more about mental health specific, but it did have really strong, like pages 26 through 46, their findings and the recommendations. I think definitely had some possible connection points.
My computer's being very slow, so I can't see anything. So sorry.
I'll put the link here. It's actually I don't know why, but for some reason, some years say Oregon Healthy Teen. The other one's just called the Oregon Student Health Survey. And it has a wide range of topics, smoking, drinking to mental health and, emotional health. But I was wrong. It's actually 6th, 8th, and 11th grade. I hadn't remembered that there were 6th graders too. So,
Yeah. So in terms of next steps, how do you all feel about like each taking one on and coming back with, like, we could end our time now and kind of give us that time to review these and then come back and share out like what we noticed and what we might want to surface or highlight. There is a document on the top right, the data points, where it would be nice to start capturing some of that. So literally just taking the points that seem connected to SEL, where we're finding the source.
where is that at, Vanessa?
It's right here at the top by, we're on the right-hand side of where the data is.
Just a second.
If you find your cursor with mine or
Oh, I see it. Yep, got it. Hello.
find my face, then it'll take you where I'm at.
Got it. Okay. So like if we were to go through something and just start literally.
Yeah, like if we each took one, like for instance, I took the SEED survey, and Todd took the Oregon Student Health Survey. And we just each were responsible for looking at one of these and surfacing any possible connections to SEL that would help us in our report, and more importantly, help shape our framework and standards.
I can commit to working through the Oregon Student Health Survey because our principal already makes us do it anyways.
Yay.
I'm pretty used to looking through it, and I've actually have been meaning to look through it more in depth this year. I could make it more of a priority is my point. When do we need, if you wanted us to do this, let's say if we decided to do this, what time frame would we want to be looking at?
So it would be our next meeting, which would be in 2 weeks. Because we meet again on the third week of, the third Tuesday.
15th is what we decided, right?
Mhm. Yep.
I can dig into the youth truth because we try to utilize that anyway, and I'll see what we can do in terms of looking at data. The
Okay.
link that I dropped in there kind of gets you to their main web page, and it highlights like
nice.
Corvallis is using it for emotional and mental health. Some districts are using it for attendance, perceptions of college and career readiness, also racial and gender inequities are called
Yay.
out. So we find a lot of value in this one.
Okay, awesome.
Todd, are you looking at you look at the state one then? You're muted.
I'm mutable. Each district that participates gets their data back. And so then we can use that to mine how the kids say that they're doing, you know, in all those different categories. But I haven't been on the state website for a long time. I believe that you can access aggregate data there, and then districts can get their district data that we can kind of dig into a little bit.
I'll look at this seed survey. I won't be here in 2 weeks, but I'll use your document and add that.
Awesome. Thanks, Angela.
So what's left? I feel like I wasn't taking notes. So
So it
Vanessa,
sounds like Angela's doing the seed. Todd is doing the youth. I'm blanking. There's so many youth truth.
Truth.
Youth truth.
perfect. You're up there. And Rebecca's doing the Oregon Healthy Teens.
Yes.
I apologize. I can't take one.
No, you're gonna
Yeah.
be out on the in a beautiful spot.
But I'll see the data that we collected through our project impact and see if that could
That'd
be
be
usable for
awesome.
anything. I'll share with you what we have, our
Okay.
findings there and everything.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there are other, I'm just trying to think outside the box. Of Leticia, did you do the impact? There's like an impact process that now I can't remember. When I worked in nonprofits, we did them through like an organization that would come do them. Who is that? What's that organization?
It's with Steve Patty. Oh my gosh, it's in the tip. Okay, let me look it up. I actually did have the book. One second.
Because I just wonder if there's some, like if they have some that are maybe not as traditional.
Dialogues in Action. Have you heard of them?
I think so, but okay, thank you.
Annie, did you put the DESA data on there? Do you think there's a way to get, I mean, like Willamette ESD, Lynn Benton, Lincoln, they're doing a lot with DESA. I don't know if that's, I have had issues with that data as well, but it is more targeted towards elementary SEL and not very many. I mean, the seed has a
Right.
little bit, but most of these are really focusing on mental health. What I'm looking at, and I know the DESA really specifically gets down to the competencies.
Yeah, that's, yeah, I don't know. So I know Marie Claire's piloting it at a few of our schools, and I would be curious.
Well, the elementary is only teacher facing, and so if that's
Right.
all, I wouldn't look at that, I guess. Panorama has one that's 3rd through 5th, but I don't know of any districts.
PPS is using Panorama, so I can poke around for that one.
Yeah, because any student, I know DESA has a student facing one at the secondary level now, and so maybe Willamette, I know they were piloting that, but that might be something if we can get student facing surveys specifically more looking at SEL competencies.
So as you hop onto that document where it says HB 2166 data points, so you would just list on there the data source, right? So just like DESA, Panorama, PPS, like if let's be as specific as possible. And then general notes was just kind of like that, what grade levels are, you know, and then how, if we know that it's only 3% of the state, just to name the things that might be problematic, just to keep in mind as we consider the data. And then we would actually take out, right, cut and paste the data points on the right-hand side. Does this tool seem like it's enough and not too overwhelming and meet our needs? Thanks, Anonymous Liger.
I wonder about if we like, yeah, never mind. Someone else can look at that.
Does anybody know of anything through the ESDs, like any other, I don't know, data sources that ESDs maybe gather separately? I don't know, just
That's a good question, Rebecca. I could ask, so I'm
Oh.
going to follow up with an email to the whole group
Mhm.
tomorrow. So I could say, please let me know or share it with me
Mhm.
so that we can add it onto here. I think that's a great idea.
Thinking about those are, I mean, often, deal with really diverse student populations that
Yeah,
I'm just thinking here locally, like it's not through our Title VI. Indian education does not go through them, but we certainly have a lot of migrant education that does go through ESD. And yeah, I think a lot of times we very much overlook there may be stuff that we don't even know about.
right.
Our ESD kind of relies on us to supply them with data, but I threw in the chat the document. You probably saw that. That's kind of what you get reports look like from Youth Truth. So I'll dig
Oh,
into a
cool.
little more detail.
Annie, which one were you gonna do? I think I missed it on the notes, or did you write it somewhere else?
I haven't said yet. I'll do whatever's left.
I don't know. You're taking notes. It's pretty
Thanks,
good to me.
Angela.
Angela, nice job.
It's all about the note taking.
Does this feel manageable and like appropriate for us and for you all? Like in terms of an immediate next step?
I think it's something that's been sort of tossed around previously and that we maybe haven't had a chance to fully do yet. And so I feel like it can't hurt. I mean, I'm just saying like it's data that has already been gathered and I just don't know if we really have had a chance to fully look at it all yet. And feels like it can't hurt anyways, that, and best case scenario, we find some good stuff that is helpful.
Yeah. All right, so we've got a plan. We each are gonna take a deep dive into some data and populate that chart so we can share that. I mean, that's what we'll share with the group on March 28th. And then we meet again in 2 weeks. So are there any next, sounds like we've got our action steps. We're each gonna kind of take a look at that in terms of agenda items or things that you want to include. So I could see us definitely reviewing and kind of highlighting what we noticed, right? So just everyone kind of sharing out. What other things do you all want to talk about at our next gathering?
That'll be a lot, really, to kind of process on the fly with everybody. And then what does that mean for what can we use it for?
I think the other thing I'd like to do between now and then, well, I guess Tennessee, you're already doing it, but like summarize this for people so that they can get on the same page so that when we come back together, it doesn't feel like a surprise or
Yeah, so that's something I'm going to be really thinking about. And I don't have a solution yet, but I invite you to come on Thursday and share your ideas if you have thoughts. But that's definitely,
have an invite on Thursday.
you don't have one on Thursday?
I saw something for Wednesday originally.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it Wednesday? Is it?
Maybe.
It's Wednesday. It's tomorrow at 2.
I wasn't sure if I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to come on that.
That's just a plan. That's our planning meeting for really thinking about how do we go about next steps and gathering your input and ideas, because I do think that has to happen more freely.
After we met last night and after getting feedback, Annie, I was thinking kind of similarly along the lines of what you're thinking around, like, I would almost wonder if we sort of threw out to the whole group somehow, I don't know how exactly, like, hey, here are some other things we're gonna all be looking at between now and, like, for example, the different data sources that we've just volunteered to look at. I guess I would be curious to hear input from the folks that were, joining us last night as the whole advisory group, what they think about those data sources also, like what feelings might they have about us looking at those things. I mean, it won't stop us from looking at those. I just mean, I wonder if that would make any difference or would help change some perspective. Like, would folks feel good about that? Those are relevant data sources. I don't know. And maybe it's worthwhile to ask for other data sources that the general group knows about that we're not thinking. But I know that could be a little tricky. I'd be just curious to know. I think I was wanting to know after we were done last night, like, okay, so what do we need to shift so that this does feel like something we can move forward with? I mean, there was pieces that were given, of course, but or where else should we be, shifting and looking exactly?
Yeah, and I will definitely ask that when I reach out, and I'm going to say the engagement team met. This is what we're turning to for now. And we've put a pin on what our engagement process will look like later. But for right now, we're looking at this. Is there anything else that you want to share with us now so that we can really honor that ahead of time? And then we'll just wait and see. I'm thinking about having some sort of like in between checkpoint, wherever milestone. Do we need like a checkpoint midway where I send out a newsletter and I say, here are the things that are coming up? And I mean, I think what's challenging is I can say those things, but then people's capacity and time to actually read through it and provide feedback is really limited. It's hard right now. And so people kind of, I think, wait until the big meeting, but that's not constructive for us moving forward. So I don't know what kind of conversation we need to have as a whole group to figure that piece out. Just things I'm wrestling with right now. Sounds like you've all been thinking about it too. Did you all sleep last night?
I like the idea of that midway checkpoint. I really like that idea a lot. I don't know how to do, you're right. How do you do that exactly so that people will engage? But I really like that idea. I think there's a lot of value in that.
I do want to acknowledge, Vanessa, you have a really hard job, and Todd, you did a great job. Like,
Todd did amazing.
thank you for taking that on. I appreciate that.
And Angela and Becca and Annie and Leticia, you all have done your part and supported and been in the background in all kinds of ways. And I see that, and I want to honor you all for that, because it's hard. It's really hard to build something. It's a lot easier to, it just is, right? It's a lot easier to be critical about things.
Blow it up.
Really hard to build something. So I just appreciate all of you and your time and your energy. It's been tremendous. And I feel so blessed to have you in my life right now. So there's that.
Likewise.
Wow, that's sweet. All right. I'm feeling tired. Are you all feeling tired? Yeah, we've done a lot of work.
We're done. Yep. Done
So
in just a little bit.
Take care of each other, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones. Reach out for anything. If you have a thought or an idea, please let me know. And yeah, hope you have a lovely afternoon. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks.
Take care.
Appreciate y'all. Take care.
Bye-bye.